Hello and welcome to another off-the-shelf board game review. This week we're going to look at Pirates vs. Dinosaurs, a relatively new release from Jolly Roger Games designed by Richard Launius. It's for 2 to 6 players, ages 10 and up. Average play times can be anywhere from 30 minutes all the way up to 90 minutes, depending on your player count. Don't let the oddball name throw you though. This is a strategy game with a couple bits of press your luck and a lot of player direct interaction, with the players taking on the roles of pirate captains who arrived on a lost island in the middle of nowhere. Think the TV show Lost, just with better writers, and replacing the crazy smoke monster with a giant Tyrannosaurus Rex that's out to eat your crew members. Thematically, players are going to be exploring this lost island, trying to figure out where the dig site is, where the buried treasure was buried many years ago by a lost pirate captain. Of course, while players are trying to find the dig site, they got to avoid the island's inhabitants like dinosaurs, the natives, quicksand, various other traps, and calamities that are going to follow their crew and their crew members. The eventual objective is to find the dig site, get as much treasure as you can, and return to the anchorage with the most amount of money to win the game. Players are going to spend their turns exploring various locations on the game board, anywhere from the mountains to swamps to jungles to the beach and various locations, having encounters and avoiding all the island's inhabitants. When players do encounter the island inhabitants, they're going to resolve what happens to them based on rolls of the dice, play of the cards, and also other interactions between the other players, where players can play cards against other players to make their odds just a little bit more challenging. In the early stages of the game, each player has a couple different map pieces that they're using to try to find actual locations that match up on the game board. Once a player has found all the locations that match all their map pieces, they can move on to actual digging for the great treasure. Of course, things aren't going to be simple at the dig site because they have to reach into a bag and grab random treasures, which can be anything from money to the volcano erupting to ghosts coming out and making your life just a little bit more difficult. The extra challenge on top of all this is that you need crew members to help you carry back your treasure back to the anchorage, and the island is doing everything it can to make sure you don't have any crew members left anymore at the end of the game. Can you balance having a full crew, running your ship as ship-shape as you can, and getting the most treasures, making it to the end of the game before the island sinks? That's how you're going to win Pirates vs. Dinosaurs. Pirates vs. Dinosaur retails for $55, and for that $55, in my opinion, you're getting a lot of good quality components. And when we talk about the wooden components, I'd say we're talking some fantastic quality components. Starting with the wooden dinosaur meeple that comes with the game. Now this wooden dinosaur is very large, especially for a meeple that isn't even used all the time in the game. Compared to the standard size of a card, and this game does use standard cards for the main playing cards, you see that this dinosaur meeple is absolutely monstrous just compared to a standard meeple, and considering its role in the game, and I'll explain that when I get to that point. But really nice quality there on the wooden components for the dinosaur, and that nice quality does continue to the rest of the components. The X's used for your locations on the board are large. They're not going to disappear on the board like a small little wooden cube would. These are really large, very easy to see on the game board. Very nice quality on those. And even the wooden meeples used in the game to denote your crew are really good quality. They didn't use just standard cubes like they probably could have got away with this in this game. They're actually shaped to look almost kind of like a silhouette of a person. Nice little touch. I think it's really cool. Very nice of them to include something as simple as that. Sometimes I will say the difference between a good game and a great game is attention to detail, and it's definitely a very nice attention to detail they've done there. The game also uses wooden cubes to track your time on your player board. Now these wooden cubes are excessively large. I'd almost say they're probably too large. They're about the size of dice, and considering the role in the game is just to track time, a little bit big, but they overdid it. They went a little overboard. I'm not complaining. It's cool. It's a little bit of extra they put in the game, and again, for $55, I have to say, for the wooden components, you're getting a great deal here. Now for the bits in the game that do use cardboard, we're talking some really good quality cardboard stock. It's nice and thick. The pieces that are made of cardboard also have artwork on them, and this artwork, while it may be called I hate to use the term cartoony, but that's the best way to describe it. It's cartoony artwork, but it definitely matches the theme of the game very well, and all the cardboard pieces have their own artwork on it. Whether it's the location pieces, the treasure pieces, and the trap pieces that come out of the bag. I'll explain those when I explain the game. This is a ghost, which is a trap in the game basically, where you're drawing at the dig site. Even the cardboard for the envoys is pretty cool, which shows a ship bringing you an extra 6 crew members. It's got a nice little reminder on the bottom, if you ever forget when you're first learning the game, that every time you have one of these in your stack, you're going to lose -1 treasure at the end of the game. Nice little touch. Definitely good quality on that cardboard component there also. The game does use the standard size playing cards and the smaller size playing cards. And I've said it before, I'm not a fan of the smaller size playing cards, but in this case I'm going to say it was probably a very good decision on the designer's part to use the smaller cards for these right here, because these cards actually go on the player board. And when you see the game set up a little bit later when I'm showing you how to play the game, you're going to see that this game has a pretty decent blueprint on a table. So if they would have used the standard cards for the player boards, these player boards would have been much larger. You would have needed a much larger table to play this game. So I'm going to say in this case this is a good decision to use the smaller cards. And there's actually good quality. They're not super thin or flimsy. They have a good snap to them. They're going to last a while. And they all have artwork on them. All the artwork on them is a little bit different depending on what they are. Even for your your first mate who works for the captain, they all have their own individual art on them. Backside also. Really good quality on there also. Also the standard playing cards, and again standard playing size, they all have their own art on them, and the art again is the cartoony kind of art, but it's done very well. It looks really cool. Yeah, show you a little close-up of a couple pieces of the art there. Again, all the art fits the theme. Very well quality there on the art. They have a very good snap to them. These are definitely good quality cards. They're not going to wear out on you anytime soon. And the good quality art carries over to the player boards also. They each have their own individual art for the captain. Doesn't have any game effect, just shows you they have their own little artwork on them. Really nice. My only complaint about these player boards is they are made out of thin paper, or I should say card stock. Very thin. I haven't done it yet. As soon as I'm done uploading this video, I'm going to actually go and glue these onto some thicker cardstock so these will last a little longer, because in my opinion it's a little bit thinner. I would have paid an extra $5 just to get these put on cardstock that's actually thicker, but it is what it is. It's my one complaint with those part of the components. The game also does come with 5 dice. Now these dice are unique for the game. They're special kinds of dice, so if you lose these you have to order extras from the manufacturer, but the dice are not engraved, which is going to be a negative in my opinion, because these symbols, they eventually rub off. It always happens anytime you have a game with specialty dice that have symbols that are not engraved. They eventually rub off from just wear and tear. Minor complaint there. I would like to have seen them actually engrave the dice so they'd last a little longer. And finally we have the rule book. The rule book for the game is actually done fairly well. Not too many errors in the rulebook. There's one error that is very important though, that happens during phase 3, and when I'm explaining how to play the game, I'll definitely make sure I point out where that error is. But other than that, the rulebook is done very well. There's no turn summary, but the game isn't really that hard to explain, and once you know how to play, it's actually not too bad. And there's actually a turn summary on each one of the player boards, so you don't need a turn summary on the back of the rulebook. Overall, the components for the game are actually pretty good. My only complaints are the minor errors in the rulebook, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a frequently asked questions release that'll cover all these. And the designer of the game, Richard Launius, has been very active on Board Game Geek, answering a lot of questions. And before I did this review, I actually sent in an email to confirm some of the issues in the rulebook, and I'm going to make sure I point those out so I do explain the game correctly. Also, 5 dice in the game is not enough. It's not going to be very uncommon for you in this game to be rolling 10 dice at one time, so 5 definitely wasn't enough. I would like to have seen 10 dice included in the game. If you're a Kickstarter backer for the game, you do get 10 dice, and it's really nice, but they definitely should have included 10 in the game. And if you're buying the game, I definitely would see if you can order a couple extra dice just to go along with your order. Luckily, all the other components are pretty top-notch, from the customized and, dare I say, gigantic meeples, from the dinosaurs to the X's to the time markers to the customized crew meeples, which honestly, like I said, they could have taken a shortcut and just thrown in some generic cubes, calling it a day, are really good quality here. The cardstock for the cards is really good quality. Again, I'm not a big fan of the smaller cards, but again, I still think that was a good decision just because they are used on a player board for this game. Also, the cards, I didn't mention this earlier, they are colorblind friendly. There's symbols at the top of the cards that have different colors on them, but there's also a symbol underneath that color denoting where these cards can be used. So if you are colorblind, you're not going to have a problem with these cards, because there are symbols that match on the game board to get past anybody who may have colorblind or color visual discrepancies. And finally, the game board is also made of some very good quality components. It's an oversized game board, and pretty much I'd have to say it's more big than it actually needed to be. But it's kind of nice. It prevents the game board from looking too busy when you got the components on the game board, and it's definitely a nice touch. Overall, the components for the game, really good quality, definitely worth your $55 you're spending for the game. I have a few things I thought could have been better, I would have spent a little extra money for, but for what you're paying, you're definitely getting more than your money's worth. Pirates vs. Dinosaurs played in 3 stages. The first stage is basically setting up the board and putting your entire crew together. To basically set up the board, you're going to take each one of these little square locations, and it's going to be different depending on how many players you have actually playing. And you're going to randomly shuffle up all these locations, and all the players are going to have matching map pieces on the board, but they don't know which pieces are placed where because it's all going to be randomized, which increases the replay value of the game. Basically, each one of these locations will be placed down in each one of these regions. They represent the beach, the grasslands, the swamp, the forest, and finally, the mountains. Additionally, each player is going to get a captain board that's going to be where they put their crew together. What they need to do first is they need to take random map segments that match the actual locations that are on the game board. But again, these are randomized, so nobody else knows what the other player's map pieces are. And they simply get a certain amount of map pieces. Again, this is going to be changing depending on how many players are actually playing. But each player is going to get a couple of these map fragments, and their eventual objective through searching the various locations is going to allow them to eventually find out where the dig site is, move to the dig site with the eventual goal of the game to get back to the anchorage with the most money. Now, like I said, Pirates vs. Dinosaurs is played in stages. The first stage is basically going to be equipping your crew. And by equipping your crew, that means each person is going to get a chance to get one random artifact that's going to be permanently added to the crew, which will give them permanent benefits throughout the rest of the game. Additionally, each player is also going to get a random first mate to help captain their ship. And each one of these first mates have different special abilities. Some of them are one-time use, some of them can be used multiple times throughout the game, and they have various power levels. Next, each player needs to decide what kind of weapons they want to equip their crew with. Do they want with swords and muskets, or do they want to be equipped with pistols and pikes? Now, each weapon has their own special benefits, and they have their own best times to be used throughout various stages of the game, but no weapon is actually better than the other. They all have their perfect uses throughout the game. The goal here is to balance your weapons with your artifacts, with your extra equipment items. Yes, you do get extra equipment items. You also get to build your crew with extra items that you get to add, such as cannons, ropes, supplies, spyglasses, and various other things that are going to make it much, much easier to find these treasure locations across the board. Now, these extra equipment items, they all have their own special costs, and if you look at each one of them, they're going to have a certain cost. The machete, for example, has a cost of 3. The parrot has a cost of 3. Or if you look at something such as the cannon, a very powerful weapon, has a cost of 6. Now, you can never have more than 3 of these items added to your board. You can have less if you like. And however many points you add up to is going to affect how many crew members you get to start with. You see, you only start with 20 points at the beginning of the game, and if you spend 10 points on equipment, that means you only have 10 points left over by crew members, and crew members cost 1 point apiece. Now, you may be asking, what's so important about crew members? Well, crew members are extremely important in this game. For instance, however many crew members you have decides how many dice you're going to roll whenever you enter an encounter on the game board. That's going to be based on whatever kind of weapon you have. For example, if your crew is equipped with pistols and pikes, for every 3 crew members you're going to get to roll 1 die. Or if you have swords and muskets, it's every 2 crew members going to allow you to roll 1 die. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, are the swords and muskets better? Not really, because the pistols and pikes give you bonuses when you're fighting different kind of monsters across the board and across your encounters. So, like I said, each one of the weapons has their time when they're better or not quite as good as the other one, but neither one of them seems to dominate the game. Additionally, your crew members serve an additional very important function in the game. Once you've located all the treasure location maps that match all the locations on the board, and you've moved from the search the island onto the dig site, you can only carry 1 piece of treasure for every 2 crew members you have left over. So if you're down to only 2 crew members by the time you reach the dig site, you can only walk away with one treasure, and the chances of you winning the game at that point are very, very slim, unless somehow, some way, the island sinks, which can happen. Once each player has filled up how their crew is going to be established at the beginning of the game, and once the game board is set up, you're ready to start your first exploration. And you simply just take your X that matches the color of your player pieces, and you place it in any one of the locations on the game board. And those locations are the mountains, the forest, the swamp, the grasslands, and the beach. You just pick a simple location, and it's okay if you pick a location when other players at. That's actually going to give you additional options later on in stage 2. Now you're going to notice each one of these locations has a little timer with a number inside it. That's how many hours of exploration it's going to cost you before you can actually search that area and find out what location is actually in that area. So we went and searched the beach as our first explore action, so we're going to see that's going to take 2 hours of time. We take our player board and you'll see a time track going from 0 to 7, and we simply place the timer cube on the location that tells us how much time is here, plus any additional penalties or bonuses for weapons or equipment we have, and some things will add penalties and bonuses. For example, items like the cannon cause you to take an extra hour at every single location. So this team happened to have a cannon, they'd actually take 3 hours to explore this area. Or if they happen to go visit the mountains, which is a timer of 4, they'd actually have to take 5 hours to explore that area. But we don't have a cannon, and we're not going to explore the mountains, we're going to explore the beach for this player's turn. Once all the players have decided which locations they want to explore on their turn, you go ahead and leave stage 1 of the game. We're ready to start stage number 2, where the meat of the game occurs. The first thing a player is going to do on their turn on stage 2 is they're going to draw 2 cards, which are going to be added to the 7 cards they should already start the game with. Now the cards are where a lot of the player interaction from Pirates vs. Dinosaurs comes from. Now there's 3 different kinds of cards in Pirates vs. Dinosaurs. The main first one is going to be dinosaur encounter cards. The second kind of card in Pirates vs. Dinosaur is a non-dinosaur encounter card. You have dinosaur encounters and you have non-dinosaur encounters. And finally there's pirate fate cards. And basically the way you encounter these cards is in phase 4 of the second stage, and we'll get to that in a second. We're still looking at phase 1 of stage 2. But before we go any a little further, I want to explain to you just how these cards are laid out and how they work. We'll go ahead and start with the encounter cards. You notice at the top of an encounter card you're going to see symbols, and as I said before when I was explaining the components, these symbols are colorblind friendly. So if you have trouble seeing colors, don't worry, there are actually symbols behind them. And basically these symbols represent where these cards can be played. For example, you see this card can be played in the swamp, it can be played on the beach, it can be played in the grassland, or it can be played in the mountain. So this card can be played on any player in any one of those 4 locations. Additionally, there's another location symbol that says shared location, which means this card can only be played if you happen to share a location with another pirate team. Of course, this means you can play the card on yourself at any time because you always share a location with yourself. Next thing on the cards, you're going to see that it's going to tell you if it's a dinosaur attack or not, and there is a big difference. Cards are either, like I said, dinosaur attacks, encounters, or non-dinosaur attack encounters. And each dinosaur is going to have a name and a strength, and there's going to have some special possible combat text that's going to affect how the combat is played out. And all cards on the bottom are going to have some text and some special abilities that you use with a bomb next to it. I'll explain what that section of the card means in just a minute. I want to concentrate on the top half with the counters and the strength of a mob and how you perform an encounter and defeat these enemies. Anytime you have an encounter in this game, you're going to roll a certain amount of dice depending on how many crew members you have left on your board and the weapon you're equipped with. So for example, if we had 15 crew members and we're using the pistols and pikes, we're going to see that we're going to get, for every 3 crew members, we're going to get to roll 1 dice. So we're going to get to roll 5 dice for an encounter. Of course, this can be modified by playing cards, and that's where this brown text comes in on the bottom of these cards. All these cards, when they're in your hand, they're not considered an encounter. They're only considered an encounter when they're played by either yourself or another player next to your player board. But as long as they're in your hand, you can play them for any one of the special benefits. Down here on the bottom, what these benefits can be is extra dice to roll, extra success chances, or anything like that, and it'll tell you when these cards can be played. Some can be played before dice rolls, some can be played after dice rolls, some will allow you to re-roll your dice and various things. And to use it, you simply say, I'm playing this card, you use the effect and just follow the instructions. Pretty straightforward. Now to try to survive this encounter, and if you fail to survive this encounter, you're going to slowly start losing your crew members. You're basically going to be rolling dice. And again, you get to roll as many dice based on your crew members and the weapon you have equipped. Roll that many dice and you're going to be looking for a skull and crossbow symbol. Anything that is not a skull and crossbow symbol is going to be a failure. Now the other two symbols you can see are a blank or crossed swords. Now the reason why you have crossed swords are they're cards that you can play that say a crossed sword is also a success as long with the skull and crossbones. So that's why you have the extra symbol. There's other circumstances where a crossed sword will be a success too, but generally, unless a roll is modified for any special reason, the only way you get a success is a skull and crossbones. Once you've rolled the dice, you're going to look for however many successes you have, and you're going to subtract the amount of successes you have from the strength of the encounter. So we have 0 successes here, and it's a strength 3 encounter. So ignoring any other special abilities for the card, don't want to confuse this too much, because these kind of dinosaurs actually are a little tougher than what I'm explaining. I'm just trying to simplify it for you. But you're going to subtract the amount of successes from the strength of the encounter, and that's how many crew members you're going to permanently lose. So in this case, we're going to lose 3 crew members. And then the encounter card, unless it says otherwise, succeed or fail, the encounter card disappears. Now losing crew members hurts us in 2 ways. 1, we now have 1 less die we can roll for all our future encounters. And 2, we have less treasure we can carry if we ever make it to the dig site. Because remember, you can only carry 1 treasure chest for every 2 crew members you have left in your crew. Once you've resolved any encounters that have been played on you either by other players or by yourself, and the nice thing about this game is you can never have more than 2 encounters placed on you. You can never have more than 1 dinosaur attack encounter, and you can never have more than 1 other encounter played on you by yourself or by other players. So the max amount of encounters you'll ever have on your turn is 2. Sometimes you'll have less, but most of the time you'll probably have 1 or 2 encounters to deal with. After the encounter phase, you're going to move to the 3rd phase of stage 2 of the game. This is the explore, battle, or envoy phase of the game. Now you can only do 1 of those 3 actions. You don't get to do all 3. You need to pick which one of those actions you want to do. You either can explore the space you're in, try to work on removing some of those hours of explore time, or you can battle another pirate crew if you guys happen to be in the same zone on the board, or you can use an envoy action. Now envoy actions are going to allow you to immediately add 6 crew members to your board, which is going to allow you to roll more dice, which is a nice thing. But you notice this little -1 symbol right here. This is the bad thing. Every time you have to pull an envoy token, it's permanently added to your board, and at the end of the game you're going to permanently lose treasures out of your score. So you want to make sure you don't pull too many of these envoy tokens. While sometimes you may need them, and the game forces you to actually draw some of these envoys if you ever run out of crew, because you can never have 0 crew in this game. As soon as you're forced to draw an envoy token, not by choice because you've lost too many crew members, you actually get less benefit from these envoys. So you want to make sure that doesn't happen. If you choose to do battle between 2 different pirates, it's pretty simple. You're going to play any cards you want to play on both sides. If you have some that are playable, may modify your dice rolls, allow you to add dice rolls or anything else. Then each player is going to roll an amount of dice depending on how many crew they have, any cards played, and their weapon. And the attacker is always automatically going to lose 1 crew member. This is something that's put in the game to dissuade you from being too aggressive with other players. Because while at the surface this game seems like in a strong take that type of game, it's actually a deeper strategy game than it appears on the surface. And you'll see when we get further into the explanation. Now as I said for the battle, what you're simply going to do is the attacker is going to roll some dice, the defender is going to roll some dice, and whoever gets the most successes, as I said, is going to lose 1 crew member no matter what. Even though they still got the most successes, they still lose 1 crew member. And again, like I said, that's to prevent you from being too overly aggressive in this game. And then the loser, the person who got the lower amount of successes, is going to lose the amount of crew members based on the difference of successes. So if one player attacks another one, gets 8 successes, the other player only gets 1 success. The person who got 8 is only going to lose 1 crew member. The other player is going to lose 7 crew members permanently from their crew. And again, with battles, you're simply rolling the dice and you're looking for skulls and crossbones. If you get skulls and crossbones, that's going to be a success. The cross swords will be a failure unless you play a card that says otherwise, and the blank space is always going to be a failure. Of course, the real objective you want to be doing is you want to be exploring this board and finding these locations that match your map pieces, because you want to move out of stage 2 and move into stage 3 where you start digging for the treasure. And that final action you can do is the explore action. Now, to do an explore action, you're simply going to roll 2 dice and you're looking for successes. But you always get at least 1 minimum success added on to whatever you roll. So you're going to roll 2 dice, and for every skull and crossbones you get, you're going to knock 1 hour off your timer, plus you also add an additional 1 success. So if I roll 2 skull and crossbones, that'd be 3 successes. I'd knock 3 hours off my search track, which is going to bring me below 0. Well, you don't go below 0, you just go to 0. And once you've reached 0 on your search track, you get to take one of these tiles in the area you're in, secretly go ahead and look at it without showing the other players, and that space happens to match one of your map locations. You have successfully located one location and you're 1 step closer to moving towards the dig site. Of course, if the tile you turn over doesn't match one of your locations, again without showing the other players, you simply place it face down, pick up your location X, and pick another zone to start another exploration in, and you simply restart your timer, 3 hours in this example, and then you end phase 3 of the stage 2 of your turn. Now, the exception to this is that if you turn over a tile and happen to be the last map fragment matching location you needed, you immediately discard all of your island cards, you discard any encounter cards that may be on you from some reason or anything like that, not that there could be any, but you discard any, and then you immediately move to the dig site, and at that point you and you alone have moved to stage 3 of the game, while the rest of the players are still in stage 2 until they also locate all the locations that match their map fragments. Now, if you haven't located all your map fragments and you started your new exploration, or if you still had time left and you haven't moved on, you move on to phase 4 of stage 2, where you get to play encounter cards against the other players. Now, the rules for playing encounter cards are pretty simple. The rule is you cannot play more than 1 encounter card on any player, including yourself. You have to follow the location requirements for the card at the top of the card, and you cannot play more than 1 type of a certain card against any player. So if a player already has a non-dinosaur encounter, you cannot play another non-dinosaur encounter against them. If they don't have a dinosaur encounter, for example, and you had this card in your hand, you could play it against them. Now remember, you can only play 1 card against any player on the encounter part, no matter what. It's 1 card, so you can play 1 card on yourself. Now, most of the cards are bad encounters, but some of them are good encounters that you can play on yourself. The trick is, if you have an encounter that blocks you, it's going to stop you from playing a good encounter card on yourself, so you need to make sure you can actually play that card on yourself. Once you're done playing encounters on yourself on other players, you simply discard if you have more than 7 cards in your hand. If you have 7 or less, you're done and your turn ends, and the next player gets to start their turn and they move through stage 2, or if they happen to be lucky enough into stage 3, they're going to take their stage 3 actions at that point, and we're going to move on to the next person. Now, if your turn comes around and you happen to be in stage 3 of the game, you have 4 options you can do at this point. The first thing you can do is you can dig for treasure. And to dig for treasure is simply going to roll 2 dice and you're looking for successes. Except at this point in the game, and only for digging, not for combat, because you can do combat if you have 2 players at the dig site, but any digging actions are a success on a skull and crossbones or the cross swords. Now, this is a discrepancy that's in the rulebook, so I want to emphasize this. Anytime you're digging or anything that involves the digging action, it's going to be a success on a skull and crossbones or across swords. Now, the rulebook says everything you do in stage 3 is a success on skull and crossbones and across swords. I got a hold of Richard Launius, and he told me that that's actually incorrect, and there's going to be an FAQ coming out that's going to clarify that rulebook and say that it's only digging action that's going to be a success. Everything else still requires a skull and crossbones to be a success unless cards are played to change that. So if you decide to do a dig action, you're simply going to roll 2 dice and you're going to look for successes. Each success is going to give you 1 draw from the treasure bag. And for every success, you're going to get 1 draw from the treasure bag, and you're going to draw 1 at a time. Even if you get 2 successes, you only draw 1 at a time. And there's 4 different things you get from the treasure bag, and you're going to hide it until you figure out what you got. If you happen to draw a treasure, you're going to keep it face down on your board, and you're not going to show the amount of it to any of the other players. It's for you to know only. The other thing you can get is you can draw the ghost. Now if you draw a ghost, you're going to get a ghost or a curse token that's going to be added to your board, and these curse tokens are bad. We're talking make your life miserable bad, because if you get enough of these tokens, you're going to start losing crew members at a very, very highly accelerated rate. So you definitely want to make sure you're not getting these ghost tokens. And did I mention that if you draw one, it gets added right back into the bag. The next thing you can get is a dinosaur attack token, and if you get a dinosaur attack token, you're basically going to start flipping island cards until you get a dinosaur encounter, and then you have to face whatever dinosaur you happen to flip up and encounter. And then you have to try to encounter it and survive it. And remember, at this point in this game, you don't have any island cards to play because you don't have access to island cards once you reach stage 3. Although the bonus to this though is, since this is a dig action, you do get a success from the cross swords or the skull and crossbones. So the dinosaur isn't as terrible as it could be, but you don't get those nice cards to play. And then of course, that dinosaur token is going to go right back in the bag. And finally, the last thing you can draw is a one step closer to the island sinking, which is the volcano. You're going to simply add these volcano tokens steadily to the volcano track, which is going to slowly cause bad things to happen, making your life a little bit tougher until you reach level 6, which is the island sinks, and any pirate that has not reached the anchorage instantly loses the game, no matter where they are on the board, no matter how much money they have, they're out. The next thing you can do if you're at the dig site with another player is you can commit yourself to a battle with the other player. The nice thing about committing yourself to a battle with another player is if you win the battle, you actually get to steal one of their treasures from their board randomly. So if they have a couple treasures, you just pick one and it's now your treasure to add to your ship's crew. Finally, another action you can do when you're at the dig site is you can do an envoy action, which is something you're probably going to be doing a lot, especially if you're starting to get these curse tokens. And again, that has a typical penalty. You're going to lose 1 treasure for every envoy token you take. So you want to avoid taking these because they're going to start making you use lots of points at the end of the game. The final thing you decide to do, either because you think you have enough treasure to win the game, or you basically just don't have enough crew left over to carry any more treasure, you decide that you're going to return the ship, and you're basically safe for the rest of the game until everybody either makes it to the anchorage or the island sinks, and that brings about the end of the game. This has been a quick overview of how to play Pirates vs. Dinosaurs. I hope I went into enough details so you can understand how the game works. The game does have a lot of take-that mechanics, especially with the card play where you can play cards against other players. And that's where the major interaction comes from, is the card play against the other players. I'm going to go ahead and clean everything up really quick, show you a quick sample game taking a turn or two. I got a 3-player game set back up again. We're going to go ahead and start with the green player. They're going to go ahead and start the game by starting their exploration action. They're going to take their green X, they're going to put it in the mountain space. Now the mountain space has a time slot on of 4, and since the green player also has the cannon, that means they have to spend an additional hour for every explore action they take. So their cube is going to move up to the number 5 slot on their board. The blue player is going to go ahead and start their action. They're going to start by exploring the beach, which is an hour location of 2. Their cube is going to move up to the number 2 slot. And finally, the red player is going to start off in the swamp, which is a 3-hour location, so their cube is going to move to the number 3 spot. Back to the green player. The green player is going to start the actual stage 2 of the game. First thing they're going to do is they're going to draw 2 cards from the island card deck, and those are going to be added to their hand. And then they're going to resolve any encounters. Now the first player of the very first round has a slight advantage. They don't have any encounters on them at the beginning of the game, so you're actually going to bypass at the first stage of the game. Now that may seem like a bonus, but it's also a negative because there are positive encounter cards that you can play on yourself that you don't get at the beginning of the game. Next thing, you get to move on to phase 3 of the second stage, and that is the explore, battle, or envoy action. We're going to go ahead and do the explore action, which means we get to roll 2 dice to see how many hours we can take off our explore action. Now the green player also has the rope, which whenever they're in the mountain allows them to add one extra die when they're rolling for exploration in the mountains. So we're going to roll 3 dice, and remember a success is any skull and crossbones, plus we had to add 1 additional immediate success. And before we roll the dice, we're going to go ahead and discard the Cliffs card, and its action on the bottom text says that we can discard this card at any time to turn any roll of the double swords into an automatic success. So on this roll, any skull and crossbones or any cross swords is going to be a success. We'll roll the dice, and unfortunately we'll roll terribly. We'll get 1 skull and crossbones, and we're going to go ahead and remedy this by playing an additional card. We'll go and discard this card right here for the text on the bottom, which allows us to re-roll 1 of the dice that we rolled. And we'll hope for a better luck, and we'll get 2 successes now. So we have 2 successes plus the 1 automatic. We'll have 3 successes. We get to move our hour time marker from the 5 minus 3 all the way down to 2. We have 2 more time left before we're done exploring this section. It's now time to play encounter cards, and remember you can play 1 card on each player, including yourself, as long as it meets the requirements. So we're going to go ahead and play this card on ourselves, which is a shared location card. It's an easy strength 3 that we should be able to beat, and it's going to prevent anybody from playing a more challenging card on ourselves. We'll place it on the other encounter slot on our player board. We're then going to play the mutiny card on the blue player, which can be played on anybody in a swamp, forest, water, or grassland space. The blue player is currently in the grassland space, so we'll play that on them as an other encounter. And then finally on the red player, we're going to place a dinosaur card on them, and this is a dinosaur attack card. And we play it on any player that happens to be in a swamp, water, grasslands, or mountain, and the red player just happens to be in the swamp, so they get to get a nice dinosaur attack on their turn. And then at this point we discard down to below 7 cards or less. If we have more than 7 cards, we don't in our hand, so that's going to be the end of the green player's turn. Blue player will go ahead and start their turn. They're going to draw 2 cards from the island card deck, and they're going to add it to their hand. And then they get to resolve any encounters that they may have. The blue player only has 1 card that's an encounter card to deal with, and that's the mutiny card. And that's going to require them to roll 5 dice. For each blank face they roll, they're going to lose 1 crew member to the lost and mutinied space. Roll the dice, and we're going to get a pretty bad roll. We're going to get actually 3 lost crew members, but we're going to help ourselves by playing this card, which allows us to roll any number of dice we want to on a roll that we just performed. So we'll discard that, pick up the 3 dice that we're not liking, and we'll get all successes at this point, so we're not going to lose any crew members, and this mutiny card is just going to go away. Next thing we're going to do, we're just going to play a Pirate Fate card, which is going to allow us to get some extra crew members. And we're simply going to roll 3 dice, and for each success we're going to get an extra crew members. We're going to roll the dice. We're not going to get any successes, so we're going to go ahead and use one of our artifacts. And this artifact can be used once per turn and allows us to re-roll a die. And we'll see if we at least improve one of our results here. And we're not going to improve the result. Not going to bother wasting any more cards because this seems like a lost cause. We'll discard that card and we'll move on to the Explorer, Battle, or Envoy phase. We're going to go ahead and explore a space. We're in a number 2 hour space, so hopefully we should be able to get enough successes to possibly look at one of these face down cards. But just to be sure, we're going to go ahead and discard the Tyrannosaurus Rex card for its use immediate ability, which is going to allow us to add 2 more dice to this roll. So we're going to get a total of 4 dice to roll plus 1 automatic success. Of course, fickle lady luck with the dice, that's kind of the fun of the game. So we're going to go ahead and discard 1 more card. That's going to allow us to re-roll 1 of these dice. And let's see if we manage to get a positive result out of this. And we managed to get 1 success. And remember, whenever we're exploring, we always get 1 automatic success. So that's going to be 2 hours of time taken off, which is enough to search the space we're on. We're going to move the timer down to 0. And we're going to go ahead and reveal one of the space tiles that we want to choose. We're going to pick either one we want. We're going to go ahead and pick this one. And we're secretly going to look at it. And we're going to see that we got the cross palms, what happens to match one of the map pieces we have. So we've actually discovered one of the 3 locations that we need to find, and we're going to add that over to the side on our board. And now the blue player only has to find 2 more map locations before they can move on to the dig site. Blue player now gets to start a new explore action. They get to pick any one of the zones they want to go to, and We're going to go ahead and move over to the forest. Now it's time to play encounter cards on other players, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a little revenge against Green, who came out aggressively against us and trying to mutiny our crew last turn. So we're going to go ahead and play some Velociraptors on them, which is going to be their dinosaur encounter on their turn. We're then going to go ahead and play a card on ourselves, Clear Pathway, which is going to give us a nice bonus when it comes to our encounter phase again. And then finally, on the red player, they're going to have to deal with a fun little card, Lost, which is going to slow them down quite a bit. The blue player doesn't have to discard any cards because they have 7 or less cards left in the hand. They're going to end their turn, and we're going to move on to the red player's turn. The red player is going to draw their 2 cards, and they're going to end up getting a Signal Fire card and the Giant T-Rex card. Time for the red player to get a little revenge against the blue player. First thing they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and play the Giant T-Rex card, and they're going to go and place that right on the board, right where the red player happens to be. Red player is automatically going to lose 1 player who's going to move to the mutiny space. And on top of that, they have to start a new explore action. Now they can either re-explore the same zone or they pick a different one at a penalty. Red doesn't really like their odds, so they're going to go ahead and move over to the grasslands, starting a new explore action. That's going to be red is going to go ahead and get a little revenge. They're going to go ahead and play the Giant T-Rex on the blue player, who's going to lose 1 crew member to the mutiny space, and they need to start a new explore action. They can either do it in the same zone they're already in at a penalty, or they're going to move to another area. And they're going to go ahead and decide to move to a new area, their grasslands, and reset their timer to 2. And the Giant T-Rex is going to continue to haunt the forest until somebody plays a card to get rid of them or to move into another area. The red player is then going to play another card, the Signal Fire card, which allows them to take 2 crew members from the mutiny space, conveniently, which has at least 1 extra crew member from the dinosaur attack. They get to add that to the board, which will allow them to roll some extra dice when it comes to combat. The red player gets to handle their encounters in any order they want to, and all players can actually do that, but the red player is going to start with the dinosaur attack, which is a strength 3 dinosaur. And these dinosaurs are especially nasty. They cause you to lose 2 crew members automatically when you fight them, no matter what, before you even begin the combat. Now the red player has 13 crew members, and they're using the swords and muskets, so they're going to get to roll 1 die for every 2 crew members they have, so they're going to get a total of 6 dice to roll. And they need to get at least 3 successes to avoid losing any crew members for the strength 3 of the dinosaurs. We're going to get 2 successes, so we're going to end up losing 1 crew member, which isn't too bad. And the dinosaur card is going to go away. And their other encounter card, the Lost card, is going to affect their exploration roll, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the exploration phase for them. The red player has the machete, so for their exploration in the swamp, they get to roll 2 extra dice. But since they have the Lost card played on, they're going to roll 1 less die for a total of 3 dice. They're going to roll plus 1 automatic success. Before they roll, they're going to discard this card, which the Cliffs card, which allows them to count all swords as also as successes. Then they're going to go ahead and roll the dice. And they're going to get 3 successes, plus 1 is a total of 4 successes, which is going to be more than enough to move their hourglass down to 0. Which means they've completed their exploration. They're going to go ahead and look at the map location. They're going to see it's the Rock Arch, which just happens to match one of their map locations that they have. So that's going to be 1 location for the red player that they have left that they need to find, leaving them with 2. Leaving the blue player with 2 locations, and green seems to be falling behind, needing 3 locations they still need to find. Red's going to start a new exploration action. They're going to move up to the mountains with the green player, which is explore actions of 4 hours. They move their timer back up to 4, and then they're going to move on to their encounter phase. Before they do, though, they're going to play the trained monkey on the green player, which says you can play on any player in the same zone as you, and you steal 2 cards from that player. And they're going to randomly steal 2 cards from the green player. And then they're going to play Lava Flow on the player to the left, who's going to have to make some rolls to avoid losing some crew members. The blue player has to roll 2 dice because of the Lava Flow, and if they get anything but a blank, they're going to lose at least 1 crew member. So they're going to lose 1 crew member to the discard pile. And then the next player in line also has to roll dice, and this is going to continue until a total of 5 crew members have been lost. So the green player is going to roll. They're going to discard 1 to the discard pile, and it's going to come back to the red player because we still got to lose 3 crew members. They're going to lose 2, so it looks like their plan is going to backfire a little bit on them. And finally, the blue player is going to roll. They're going to get 2 successes, and they're going to lose 2 additional crew members. And actually, I'm going to take 1 crew member back because I failed at math. That would have been 6, and we're only supposed to lose 5 crew members to the lava flow card. Total of 5 crew members lost for a lava flow card. That crew is going to be done, and now the red player gets to play their encounter cards on themselves and other players that they like. Blue is going to only play 1 encounter card on their turn because they're trying to save some cards for other uses. They're going to play the Velociraptors on the blue player, and that's going to be the end of that. The red player doesn't have more than 7 cards in their hands, so they're going to end their turn, and we're going to move back to the green player. Green player is going to go ahead and draw 2 cards to start their turn off, and then they're going to have to take some encounters. First thing they're going to do is they're going to deal with the Velociraptors, which are a really mean set of dinosaurs that prevent them from using the cannon during the fight. We have 4 dice we can roll because we only have 8 crew members. But before we solve our encounters, we do have our artifact, which is the lucky dice, which may help us out here to avoid some of these encounters. Lucky die is going to allow us to roll 1 die for each one of the encounters. If we get a success, we don't have to deal with the encounter. So we're going to go ahead and roll for the Velociraptor attack now. We're going to go ahead and get a success, so we don't have to deal with the Velociraptors. We're going to go ahead and discard that card. And then we're going to move on to the native scouts that we have to deal with and see if we can actually avoid dealing with them also. We're going to get another success. We're having a lot of good luck right now. We don't have to deal with that encounter at all. And now we can move on to the Explore, Battle, or Envoy phase. And we're going to go ahead and battle the red player who happens to be in the same space as us. But before we do that, green is going to attempt to get a couple more crew members so they can get a couple extra dice for this combat roll. They're going to play a Scout Ahead card, which allows them to discard this to grab 2 extra crew members for the mutiny space, which is going to give them 1 extra die to roll. And they're going to play the Castaways card, which allows them to roll 3 dice to see if they get some extra crew members. We're going to get 2 successes, so we're just going to give us 2 more crew members. And we're actually looking a lot better for this combat that's going to come up with the red player. We're going to go ahead and initiate the combat now, and what we do is we're going to roll 1 die for every 2 crew members we have because we are using the swords and muskets. The red player is also using the sword and muskets, and they only have 10 crew members, so they're only going to get to roll 5 dice versus our much greater amount of dice. We're going to get 6 dice because we have 12 crew members, plus 3 more for the cannon we're wielding, plus we're going to discard the Tyrannosaurus Rex for an extra 2 dice, bringing it to a total of 11 dice we have to roll for this combat. Unfortunately, it's not looking too good for the red player because they don't have any cards they can play to roll any extra dice, so they're only going to get 5 dice versus the green player's 11 dice. And we actually have 11 dice and we only have 10 dice, so we're going to go ahead and roll 1 extras, 4, and we're going to get only 2 successes, which isn't that great, so we're going to go ahead and use our power of our first mate, which allows us to do a couple more successes. It's only usable once, but we're going to go ahead and use it to see if we get more than 2 successes from our dice roll. We're going to get 4 successes, plus we get to re-roll 1 more die because we actually need 11. I only have 10. So that's going to give us a total of 5 successes, which is a pretty decent combat roll. And now it's time for the red player to see if they can get any successes. They're going to get 5 dice, and they're only going to get 2 successes. And unfortunately, they don't have any cards that they can play to help themselves out, so they're going to lose the difference in how many dice successes they got versus the green player. Green player got 5 successes, they only got 2, so they're going to lose 3 crew members to the supply. For the encounter phase, the green player is going to add insult to injury to the red player. They're going to play a dinosaur card on them, which is the last card the green player has, so they don't have to discard. That's going to end their turn. And I think that's going to end our sample game right here. Don't want this to go too long, but you get a good idea of how the game is played. Showed you how the players can interact with each other, how you can be kind of aggressive against each other, affect how the other players are playing, and see a lot of direct interaction between the players. As a parent of 2 young board gamers, it's very important for me every time I review a game to sit down and decide how family friendly a game is, because to me, family game night is important. It's a lot of fun. My sons have a lot of fun playing games with their dad, and their favorite thing to do is to gang up and try to take dad out in any game they play. Now visually, Pirates vs. Dinosaur is fairly sanitized when it comes to the graphic and the images in the game. The worst thing you may see in the artwork, and again this is pretty cartoonish artwork, is you may see a little bit of blood occasionally, but it's not too serious. You may see a little bit of something like on a knife with a little bit of blood on it, or worst case you may see a dinosaur doing what dinosaurs do, eating other things. Now that's probably the most graphical image you'll see in the game, and even the board, everything else in the game, nothing is anything that you'd have a problem with your children seeing. So graphically, the game is very family friendly. Complexity wise, the game is not too complex. The rounds are pretty easy. The most complex thing that you're going to have to do is the interaction of the cards, because a lot of the cards have multiple abilities on them, and there's going to be timing issues. You have to know when to use these cards, and those are going to be a little bit challenging for younger players to understand and use their cards properly. But luckily, it's not too difficult to figure out, so I think any child who's about 8 or 9 years old can pretty much figure that out pretty easily. Additionally, Pirates vs. Dinosaur does play up to 6 players, so any family should be able to get this game to the table with the entire family, which is definitely a bonus. The one negative I can say for the game as a family game is it is a take that kind of game, and younger players sometimes have problems when they feel like they're being ganged up on. Now young players have no problem ganging up on the parents because they think it's fun, but as soon as the tables are turned, sometimes there can be hurt feelings, and it's very easy for that to happen in this kind of game, because there are a lot of cards that you play in this game that can really start, I hate to use the term, but you start screwing over the other players. And you're going to have to take it easy on some of the younger players if you're trying to play with the younger kids like 7 or 8 years old, because they may feel picked on, because it is easy to pick on other players in this game. Now the game does have limiting factors to prevent you from over picking on another player. You can never play more than 1 card on a player per turn, and if you already have 2 cards played on you, nobody else can play cards on you, so you're kind of protecting that aspect. But it only prevents you from having encounters played on you. It doesn't stop the Pirate Fate cards, which can also allow you to interact with other players and again start picking on them, force them to lose cards, force them to lose crew members, force them to lose treasures. And by that I mean you can't lose treasures by cards being played on you, but if you are on the dig site, other players can attack your pirates at the dig site, and if you lose a battle, you actually can lose treasures. And that can be very frustrating for young players. I think Pirates vs. Dinosaurs can be a very family-friendly game due to its player count and due to the simplicity of the rules, but just understand that there can be some frustration that will come from this game, whether it's a younger player feeling picked on or just the randomness of the game making them feel like they're just not standing a chance. And as I said, Pirates vs. Dinosaur plays from 2 to 6 players, and I think the sweet spot for this game is going to be 3 to 5 players. Probably best is a 4-player game. Now a 6-player game is going to feel too long, and that's the negative anytime you're playing a push your luck style game. Push your luck style games have a tendency to wear themselves thin after about 90 minutes of play, and with 6 players it is possible to hit that player mark, and the game can get a little bit too chaotic with 6 players. On the other end of the spectrum, as a 2-player game, it's not quite as fun because you're kind of losing the fun aspect of this game, which is the aggression between the other players. With 2 players, there's a lot of cards that you're not going to be able to use against the other players because they can only be used on players in the same space as you, and if you just basically stay away from the other player, those cards are going to be played on you. Plus, it kind of loses something when you only have 2 players, because you're not really feeling like you're going out against each other as much as you possibly can in a game with more than 2 players. Not saying the game is bad with 2 players, I just don't feel it's at its best with 2 players. I think as soon as you get 3, 4, 5 players, you get the perfect play time, you get the perfect amount of interaction, and the game gives you the most enjoyment with 3, 4, and 5 players. I think the sweet spot is 4 players, 3 players is good, 5 players is good. I think 5 players may be pushing the time frame too much, I think 3 players may be pushing the lack of interaction. So again, I think as a 4-player game, Pirates vs. Dinosaurs is going to shine the best. But again, it does play with 2 to 6 players. I don't think 2 and 6 are going to be the best. 3 to 5 is going to be your most enjoyable way to play Pirates vs. Dinosaurs. Pirates vs. Dinosaur is a really interesting game. I have to admit, when I first heard the name, I thought it was a very oddball, goofy game that I wasn't even going to give a second look to until I saw who the designer was. I saw it was Richard Launius, and I'm kind of a fan of Richard Launius. I enjoy his designs. Defenders of the Realms is one of my, probably if not one of, I'd have to say it's in my top 3 of favorite cooperative games. I love the theme, I love the design, and I'm not afraid to admit I also enjoy Arkham Horror. I see some of the why some people don't like Arkham Horror, but I enjoy Arkham Horror, and I do enjoy a lot of Richard Launius' design, so I figured the game was worth at least giving a look at. And I have to admit, the first couple times I played Pirates vs. Dinosaurs, I thought it was basically just a take that style game with not too much strategy, and part of the problem with that was a couple of the rules discrepancies in the rule book that made me have a different strategy of how I should play the game. Now, the main discrepancy in the rulebook is with the rule on how Stage 3 acts. It makes it look like one of the weapons in the game are pretty much totally worthless, because it seemed like the best strategy in the game, as the rules are written, is to wait for somebody to make it to the anchorage, let them get there first, and then suddenly just sneak up behind them with a better weapon, the more crew, and just suddenly just start attacking them and stealing all their treasures and just making their life as miserable as possible. And to me, that made it seem more of a beer and pretzels game versus a strategy game, which is what I thought the game would be. And then I did a little investigating and got a little clarification on the rule and found out that I was reading the rule wrong, and then I explained it to my playing group, and we decided to play the game a little bit more as a strategy game. And after a couple more plays, we started to realize that there is actually quite a bit of strategy to this game. It just seems like it's more of a take that game at first appearance, but there is strategy here. Now, I'm not going to claim the game has deep strategy such as a Euro game, especially with the randomness of the cards, the randomness of the dice, and other random factors that are going to affect this game, especially with how much luck there is in this game. And I think that's my biggest warning about this game for anybody who's interested in trying Pirates vs. Dinosaurs. There are a couple of luck factors in this game that can make the game unbalanced if somebody's extremely lucky. Especially if one player just happens to have the right location to match their map piece, and within a couple turns they've already reached Stage 3 and they're already working on the anchorage, while the other players are still struggling trying to find their locations and slowly falling further and further behind of the other players. Plus, the dice in this game can be very, very fickle. If you're just having one of those days where the dice just seem to like you, or maybe I should say don't really like you that much, and you're failing your rolls and you're losing crew member left and right, and you're spending most of your explorer turns having to go for the envoy actions just because you can't keep up with the loss of your crew members, you're going to feel like the game is, I hate to use a term, but you're going to feel like the other players and the game is out to get you. Now, the game does have some built-in factors to help compensate for that. There are cards that you can play that'll give you extra crew members, extra supplies, and extra abilities such as that'll help you. There's also cards you can play on other players, such as the giant T-Rex, which I didn't get into, but if you happen to play him on other players, he can help make everybody else's day pretty bad while you help try to catch up with other players. Plus, the Pirate Fate cards are kind of a nice balancer, especially if you get a couple good ones in your hand at the right time. But again, that does go back to the luck thing, because there are more encounter cards in the game than there are Pirate Fate cards. And sometimes you're not going to get the Pirate Fate cards you need to save your skin. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that while Pirates vs. Dinosaurs is a fun strategy game, and it can be a lot of fun, especially if you have a couple of friends who don't mind you include a couple of beers in your gameplay, and you really start ribbing the other players, and you really start having, a lot of exciting fun, and you're having fun because you just made another player's day just a little more difficult. That's where Pirates vs. Dinosaurs can be a lot of fun. I just want to let you know that even though it is a strategy game, and there are a lot of good strategies to the game, and you have to constantly be using strategies, just know that there are a lot of luck elements to this game. And if you're the kind of player who does not like luck in your strategy games, you're probably not going to have as much fun with Pirates vs. Dinosaurs as a person who doesn't mind a lot of luck in their strategy games. I personally, if I'm in the mood and my player group is in the mood, we really enjoy strategy games with lots of luck, especially with take that mechanics. Now luckily, Pirates vs. Dinosaur does not overstay its welcome, which is nice because sometimes games with take that mechanics, if they overstay their welcome, it just gets old really quick. A good example is Munchkin. Munchkin's fun for 20 minutes, not fun for an hour. Of course, in my humble opinion, I think Pirates vs. Dinosaurs is 1,000 times better than Munchkin, but that's just my opinion. But I digress because this isn't a review of Munchkin, this is a review of Pirates vs. Dinosaurs. So, overall, gameplay-wise, I'd say Pirates vs. Dinosaurs is a fun strategy game. I like the fact that it plays from 2 to 6 players, although I do contend that the sweet spot for this game is going to be 3, 4, or 5 players. I think 6 players is going to drag on just a little bit too long, especially with these take that mechanics, and the fact that turns are going to start feeling like they're taking just a little bit too long, and it's very easy to fall behind in this game if luck is definitely not on your side. Also, if you happen to be the kind of player who does not like having your strategies messed with by other players, you also may want to think twice before playing this game, because this game definitely allows you to mess with the other players and make their lives just a little more difficult. And you can also dogpile on the leader in this game. Now, while you can't play more than 2 encounter cards on another player, nothing stops you from playing a Pirate Fate card on another player and making those encounters ever so much more difficult. Especially if somebody appears to be in the lead and look like they only need one more map fragment, everybody else can potentially dogpile on that person and hold them back while everybody else tries to catch up. I think you get the point about the gameplay though and what kind of game this is. The components for the game are fantastic for what you're paying. You're spending $55 for a game that has some awesome meeples. I mean, check out the dinosaur. The dinosaur is huge and he looks really cool on the board, especially if he ever lands on his feet when I toss him down, because that just looks so much cooler. Also, the meeples that come with the game, they could have just cut corners and used little square cubes. They didn't. The meeples look like little silhouettes. The cards that come with the game have some great artwork on them. Yes, it's cartoony, but that matches the style of the game and it looks awesome. The artwork's great on the player boards, but player boards could have been thicker quality. And again, when I'm done with this review, I'm definitely going to give these a little bit of treatment with a better backing and attach them with a little bit of glue so they're going to last a little bit longer. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier about the dice, they're customized dice and they're not engraved. Major no-no in my opinion, because customized dice are hard to replace just with a standard 6-sider, and if they're not engraved, these symbols are going to start rubbing off after a couple dozen plays. If you ever played games like Hero Quest or anything like that, you know exactly what I'm talking about when those dice start wearing out. Overall though, if you're looking for a good strategy game that's a lot of fun, has a lot of replayability, has asymmetrical powers, is a great game that can be played for many ages from young to adults, has a good player count, and doesn't overstay its welcome unless you play with 6 players. Has lots and lots of replay variety, from different randomizing of the setups, different randomizing of what kind of team you're going to have, able to build different teams, different artifacts, different first mates. The game is not going to play the same way every time you play, because it's going to feel a little bit differently. Different encounters, different results, different everything. Lots of replay value there. I think Pirates vs. Dinosaurs, for what it is a fun, enjoyable game. Doesn't take too long to play, and I think it's a good game to add to your collection if you enjoy a lighter strategy game. This has been another off-the-shelf board game review. Thanks for watching.